Good morning, everyone. 18 minutes after the hour. Welcome to the Sunrise Show. Craig Fronikin, and want to welcome onto the program Alan Shusterman. He's the founder and head of the School for Tomorrow, and you can get to sftedu.org, and it's a fascinating study. And Alan, we've talked before, and I guess with this school, explain to our listeners what you've done, because you've gotten out of, it's a private school, yes. It's gotten out of the charter school, and you've gotten away from the district, school district that, would be public education. Anyway, Alan, thank you so much for being on the program this morning.
Sure, Craig. Thank you very much for having me back. Let me start with what motivated me to start School for Tomorrow. We're busy now in this presidential season, finally, talking about the fear of terrorism and what terrorism is going to do to this country, and the economy, and will the economy get better, and global warming. And absent from all this is literally the number one threat that is absolutely going to doom our children in this country. And it's a homegrown threat, and it's a threat. The good news is we know how to change it, but we're not doing anything about it. And that's the state of K through 12 education in this country.
Yeah.
Because there is no other industry, if you look at every other industry in this country, no other industry has changed so little and performed so poorly for the last 10, 20, or 30 years as K through 12 education.
I saw in this article that you wrote that there's going to be 2 million manufacturing jobs that American manufacturers will not be able to fill.
Right. We are not preparing our youth for both blue-collar jobs right up to the most fancy and well-paying white-collar jobs. If you look at statistics, most people don't know this, we're busy celebrating the fact that 80% of our high school students graduate. That means 20% don't even graduate. Meanwhile, when you flip forward to college, I think most people probably don't know this, about 30% of freshmen in colleges, four-year colleges across this country, drop out after their first year.
30%?
And if you look at what percentage of kids starting four-year colleges complete it within 6 years, and notice the statistic they use is 6 years, not the traditional 4 years. 6 years, it's only 55% are completing, so 45% aren't even completing their degrees. Then you flash forward and talk to employers, and employer after employer who I talk to, again, in all ranges of jobs, talk about how unprepared our youth are for jobs. And then you flash forward and look at colleges, and here's something to me that shows that this whole system is completely broken down. Because what I do, and I've both read surveys and I anecdotally talk to every college professor I ever can meet who teaches at a highly selective school. So I'm not talking about Podunk U in the middle of nowhere. I'm talking about the Ivy Leagues and the equivalent.
Right.
And every professor I've ever met who teaches freshmen, it just happened this weekend again, if you just simply ask, how well prepared are your students? These are the best and brightest who supposedly have come from the best public and private schools in this country. How well prepared are your students when they arrive? There are two things that every professor complains about. Number one, most of my students can't write worth a damn. And number two, as one professor put it, these students can't think their way out of a paper bag. Yeah. They are not able to think critically, think logically, think creatively, because basically what our K through 12 education model continues to emphasize in students are two things: memorizing a bunch of facts that increasingly are useless to memorize because we now have access to those same facts literally in our pockets in our smartphones. And then number two, it's following directions or conforming to some sort of norm. It does not at all prepare kids for the economy and the world they're entering.
No, and what's amazing to me, Alan, is all those stats, and you even gave, 80% graduation rate in Oregon. We're facing 65% graduation rate. You take 35 out of 100 students, 35 simply aren't graduate with a high school diploma. You're thinking, where are they? But then on top of everything else, you look at the false narrative and the political platform of pushing minimum wage to $15 an hour, and yet you mention 2 million high-skilled manufacturing jobs in this country are expected to go unfilled over the next 10 years. You're going, what a false narrative that is. They're just going to give them the minimum wage of $15 an hour when they could be making a living wage in a manufacturing facility?
Yeah, no, when you talk about false narratives, the entire education system has been held up by false narratives, false assumptions, false choices that remain unquestioned, largely because if you look at K through 12 again as an industry, it is unique in a number of ways. Number one, it's the only truly government-run industry we have, other than, I guess, the military. But, of course, if the military performed the way education would, we wouldn't even be debating whether we should be going to war, because we'd be losing every war left and right and fighting it with muskets or something, okay?
Oh, my goodness.
It's just crazy. Okay, so number two, though, so we have government-run. Number two, we also have in this country, right, problem with special interests. Well, there's no more powerful special interest in this country than the teachers' unions. And the teachers' unions have managed to basically maintain, again, this inadequate status quo. And that's not to knock teachers, by the way.
Right.
Because teachers are out there, if you talk to teachers, and they're out there, at least those teachers who really care about the kids, which I think most of them, although teaching these days, I'm going off on a side issue, which my colleagues get upset about, but in at least certain states, like the state I live in, Maryland, teaching is a pretty damn good career. We can make a pretty good amount of money with good benefits. So increasingly, in some ways, we're attracting teachers who are taking the job just for the money, which is a whole other thing. The teachers who tend to get frustrated and teachers who ultimately are leaving are those who are doing it for the love of kids and the love of learning, and they're increasingly frustrated that they can't do what they know they want to be doing to help these kids. And that is true, again, in public and private schools in this town where I live and across the country. As you speak to the great teachers, the ones that you and I remember of changing our lives 20, 30, 40 years ago, they're alienated now with the direction things have gone because they simply can't provide the education that they know these kids need because their hands are tied by all kinds of different laws and, brings up.
Yeah, and then, Alan, think about this.
Yeah.
Think of the teachers that have been spending out of their own pocket for years because they want the children to have the right stuff, and they can't stand it. They just go, and they go buy whatever they need because they can't wait because they want their kids to move forward.
No, absolutely. I mean, we have these, again, I know in this state, I think probably every state is true, the public school system has these bloated administrative payrolls where people are sitting around, I don't know, doing what, getting paid a lot of money, while poor teachers on the front lines, taking money out of their own pocket to try to provide these kids with a minimum of what they need.
Wow. Alan, we've got to get to a break, but let's do that and come right back. We're talking to Alan Shusterman. He's the founder and head of the School for Tomorrow. edu.org is the website, a groundbreaking, nonprofit model, independent school committed to serving a diversity of students in grades 4 through 12. And we got to get to the break, and we'll come right back. More on the Sunrise Show after this.
So get up. Top of the morning to you.
Good morning, everyone. 33 minutes after the hour. Welcome to the Sunrise Show. Continuing with Alan Shusterman, and founder and the head of School for Tomorrow, their website, sftedu.org. And I really encourage everyone to check it out because Alan's done something that I haven't seen anywhere else. Alan, do you have anybody else blazing the trail besides yourself on a private school that's showing this plan of customization and what did you call it? Social
Social-emotional learning, yeah.
Yes,
I'll go to that in a little bit. You're starting to see some schools, both charter, public, and private schools in the country, unfortunately there's only a handful, who are doing some of what we're doing. We're the only school that I know of that, at least secondary school that goes through high school, that is trying to do a complete whole school redesign or overhaul, which is really what we need. But there are certainly schools out there that are doing segments of what we're doing who we're learning from. If you look, I talked about we kind of set the stage of the disastrous situation that we have in K-12 education that people aren't talking about. Now let's go to the good news, which is we do know how to change it. We do know what we need to do to change, and it's just a matter of people being willing to do it. And the first piece of good news on that front is money is not the issue. There's plenty of money being sunk into education.
Oh, my goodness, yeah, it's huge budget.
It's just being wasted on a model of education that is antiquated. It's as if we were still propping up, the analogy I've used is as if we're still crossing the country in covered wagons. And that was our mode of transportation. We could sink a lot of money into coming up with the fanciest covered wagons we want, but ultimately there's a better way to do it. But in education, we're still in the covered wagon stage of transportation.
And you know what's amazing, Alan, is that you said it so profoundly in our first segment, is that education, public education in this country is truly a government-run industry. That was shocking to me. That you're just spot on with that. And then you look, they have all of the power. They can do anything they want. They've got the budget. They've got the thing. And yet they simply do not change with the times.
Correct. So the idea behind School for Tomorrow is that we're going to create. Now we're doing it in the private sector because that's where we have the freedom from government regulation to show what a school can and should be in the 21st century. So what we're going to do, and what we're now in our 7th year of doing, is creating this alternative model that is so superior in every way, where kids are happier, healthier, learning so much more than they possibly could in any public or private school at this point in the country. Once we show that, at that point then, we hope that parents will see this, and because parents ultimately are the ones who really care about their kids, and start demanding, hey, we want one of these. We want a School for Tomorrow. We're not willing to accept same old, which we're stuck with. And there will become some sort of grassroots movement that will rise up and say, we can do better. We can see it right there. But the key is, while there have been a bunch of dozens of books written about here's what a school for the 21st century could look like, and dozens of articles, that's all theory. What we're doing at School for Tomorrow is implementing it and showing what a different type of school can do for kids. And the key components of that different type of school, I used to talk about 11 of them. Of course, we never have time on radio to talk about 11, but let me talk about 2 components. Number 1 is customization. Every other industry in this country has moved into the age of customization. Yet in education, we're still back to the days of when we went to buy coffee and they gave us a cup of coffee. And if they were really special, maybe we got a cup of coffee with some cream and sugar. But now I can go to 7-Eleven for a very cheap cost and get the perfect cup of coffee for myself tomorrow. And if I change my mind the next day, I get a totally different cup of coffee.
Right.
In education, we're still saying, you're a 6th grader, therefore you should learn this and this way and by now. And you're a 7th grader, therefore you shall do this. Customization is even more important than my coffee choices. And you can do it. And customization in education means, among other things, setting up the system so that each student can learn what they are learning in that moment at the level that makes sense for them, at the pace that makes sense for them, in the ways that make sense for them. That's an incredibly more efficient way to learn. It's an incredibly more inspiring, and it's also a healthier way. It also means for each student trying to give them opportunities in the areas that they are most passionate about and the areas that they're best in. The opportunity to the nth degree in high school to really succeed, because ultimately, if you look at life, we end up becoming successful by playing to our strengths. And schools oftentimes, they emphasize our weaknesses, and we spend all our time trying to work on our weaknesses, oftentimes weaknesses that aren't going to really matter in the real world, and we neglect the strengths. So customization, design the education to maximize it for each individual kid.
You know, it's interesting, Alan, you've privatized the School for Tomorrow. sftedu.org is the website, but out west, I mean, even though you're in Silver Spring, Maryland, and Reston, Virginia, since 2009, so congratulations on 6 years with education. But the next thing is charter schools and online schools. I mean, people are bailing at a higher and higher rate. And now what's happened, I mean, I know you're just going to shake your head that the charter schools locally here get 80% of the budget per student, and the 20% stays as an admin fee for public school.
Right. Yeah, so our next step as an institution at School for Tomorrow, we just opened up a second campus to kind of practice replicating the model that we're creating. Our next step within 3 to 5 years is we are going to open a charter school, and we're going to open a charter school in the District of Columbia right outside the capital to show the whole world what we can do with an inner-city socioeconomically disadvantaged population. Because the model we're creating with both customization and the second component, which is social-emotional learning, is going to be even more profoundly important for the inner-city, socially disadvantaged kids. And let me talk a little about social emotional learning quickly, because that's a whole other
that's
area.
huge, because our kids are not staying connected, and look what social and economical problems we've got right now.
Right. So if you look at, there are two major reasons why we need to have a fully integrated social emotional learning component to everything we do in schools. And again, School for Tomorrow is the only school I know that's doing that right now. There are some schools, though, who do little small aspects of it, and the research shows that that's important. When you do it full scale, it completely changes these kids' lives. And the reason for doing it is, number one, if you look at adult success and satisfaction, whether you define it in purely economic terms or you define it in terms of happiness, either way, ultimately, adult success and satisfaction derives from being well-developed and healthy socially, emotionally, and physically also. It's just a third component. Our schools actually set up to physically injure kids with the start times that they have and the elimination of things like recess. So one, it's essential that we help kids address and develop and grow socially, emotionally, and physically in middle and high school and elementary school. Secondly, and this is one of these false myths that the education establishment presents, they say, in order to be rigorous with our academics, we don't have time for this silly stuff like social, emotional learning or physical. Who needs sleep? We got to have these kids learning. But in fact, the reality is, once you set up an academic model that includes a customized approach, includes other aspects which I don't have time to talk about, but such as an interdisciplinary approach to learning, project-based learning, and a whole bunch of other ways that we now know learning, including the components of online learning, frankly. Once you have an academic model that makes sense, the number one thing that's going to interfere with a kid's learning is something that's going on in their social, emotional, or physical self at that moment. So by focusing on the social, emotional learning, it's inherently important, but it also enhances academics. So again, it's good news when you untangle all the myths that have been created by why we can't change education out there by the establishment. And what you can do is, going back to bottom line, at the same cost, by rejiggering, basically changing the industry, changing the paradigm, like we've seen in other industries, you can produce an education that provides kids with a well-rounded education, with a superior academic education, social emotional learning involved in that, for the same cost. So the upside, the solution is just sitting there if we would have a country that would suddenly realize that and become committed to changing our K-12 education radically.
Well, and it's, you would see all of the kids that are not connected or rather disconnected, and you look at the social problem, and everyone's attributing it to mental illness. I mean, mental illness shouting from the rooftops, and here we've got a chance to help kids in their social and emotional learning programs, and no one's doing it.
Right. The childhood anxiety, depression, and the worst of all, suicide, is all skyrocketing in this country. And it's a combination of, frankly, schools themselves are adding to it, and growing up is incredibly complex and much more challenging than it ever was in today's world than when we grew up. So schools have to address and help these kids learn how to make it through an increasingly scary, complex world.
It's amazing. Alan, a couple of questions, then we got to go, but educators are thumbs up with you, right? Do you get any opposition?
No, okay. So you have to define it. Yeah, yes, educators are thumbs up in that, certainly, as I said, those teachers who are there, who really care about kids and the welfare of kids, they love us, and they come, they spread the word, and we love having them come visit us.
Right.
People who are beholden to the establishment or have an interest in the status quo, we're a threat to everything they're doing. So they try to come up with ways to discredit us, but that's not easy because our students and their experience speaks for themselves.
Right, right.
But yes, I think those who really care about kids, they will jump on the bandwagon once we have it. But you got to realize that for them, they're going against their culture to speak out. So I often have teachers who come visit, and they say, well, I got to be very careful what I bring back to my classroom, back to my school, because schools, just like they teach conformity to kids, they also, with teachers, is very much about conformity and not rocking the boat.
Exactly. Wow. Alan, it's fascinating. Thank you so much. We'll have you back again because this is cutting edge stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Alan Shusterman, he's the founder and head of School for Tomorrow, the website sftedu.org, and we'll put that link up on our Facebook page, Sunrise on KCMX. And Alan, it's great. Just keep on doing what you're doing, and we just will continue to report from this side because, results rule.
Yep.
Bottom line.
No,
so
you got it.
Well, Alan, thank you again, and wish you a Merry Christmas. Get some time off, and we'll be talking to you real soon.
Okay, thank you much.
All right.
Take care, Greg.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow, we got to get to a break, but that was fascinating. Alan Shusterman, ladies and gentlemen, and I tell you what, he is nailing it, and teachers are feeling it, and I'll tell you what, why aren't we doing right by our kids? I'll tell you what, it's unbelievable. All right, well, a lot of other fun things happening. Habitat for Humanity is here, so let's get them on. We'll be right back. More on the Sunrise Show, News Radio 880 KCMX. You can find us on the web, kcmxam.com. All of our links are there, our Facebook page, our Twitter page, my email address, craig@radiomedford.com, and the phone number, 541-772-8255.